Manitoba Hydro's customers are plugged into a huge northern hydropower system. Our TVs, toasters, and indeed our daily lives depend on the electricity produced by remote dams. But at the far end of the transmission line lies a reality few of us ever see. Over the past half-century, Manitoba Hydro has re-engineered the province's 2 largest rivers, 3 of its 5 largest lakes, and many smaller bodies of water. The result at the southern end of the transmission line, both in Manitoba and the U.S. Midwest, where a third of Manitoba Hydro's power ends up, is reliable, inexpensive, low-carbon energy. The result in the north is more complicated. While 5 First Nations have joined Manitoba Hydro's push to expand the northern generation system, the wounds from the existing project, both on the land and in people's hearts, remain a defining characteristic of northern Manitoba. Some of the damage has been healed by time, by the Hydro First Nations partnerships, and by the $948 million the company has spent on compensation and mitigation over the past 50 years. But still, much of the damage remains. Matthew Sawatzky, a Winnipeg photographer and videographer, and Ellen Cook, an elder from the Misipawistik Cree Nation, traveled to 4 hydro-affected communities in the fall of 2012. Their goal was to document part of the reality at the northern end of the transmission line. The images and words they brought back are not the only version of events, but they are part of the story that is too often overlooked or relegated to the past. All of us who use power from Manitoba's dams have a right and a responsibility to know what happens at the other end of the transmission line, to see what the waterways look like, and to hear from people who live there. Understanding the northern reality is all the more important as Manitoba decides whether to build 2 huge new dams, and as the U.S. Midwest decides whether to plug into those dams. At the heart of Wetaskiwak Cree Nation territory lies Split Lake. The lake is a widening of the Nelson River, Manitoba's largest river and the heart of Manitoba Hydro's generating system. It flows from Lake Winnipeg to Hudson Bay. 5 dams were built on the Nelson between 1957 and 1990, 2 upstream of Split Lake and 3 downstream. These projects continue to harm the ecosystems used by the Wetaskiwak Cree. Now, Manitoba Hydro wants to build another dam. The proposed Kias Dam would sit in the river 58 kilometers downstream of the Split Lake community. The Wetaskiwak Cree Nation is partnering with Manitoba Hydro in development of the Kias proposal. Some community members are excited about this, and others are not.
My late grandfather, John George Garrison, was a commercial fisherman on this lake. Just from my travels with him on the lake, and now I see a big difference. They've done so much to this lake. You can never get this lake and this river back to the way it used to be. The erosion, it's irreversible. The land falling into the water, trees falling into the water, willows dying along the shore, weed beds dying off on the lake, waterfowl gone off the lake, fish missing from places that they used to be found at easily, sturgeon depleting. It's not like it used to be back in the day when I used to go with my late grandfather on the lake. That 9.9 in a chestnut canoe. You used to be able to see for quite a ways down into the water. The old man used to say, "Oh boy, look out." Just by looking at, I remember that as a kid looking down into the water, I could see probably a foot to 2 feet down. I could see all the white bellies of all the pickerel in the net. Now you have to pull the net right up out of the water just to see what you have in your net. There's a slime that builds up on them now. They're not, it's not as clean as it used to be. Then that one spot by Imanaza, there used to be a nice sandy point that you could walk, beach to walk to that island. Then on that island they used to pick berries. Boy, I miss Ted means that. They used to pick berries there all the time. Kids used to play on the beach. Women used to wash clothes on the nega. And now that's all gone. The places where the cabins used to be, the ground is not there no more. Matagan, as a miss way pin out there no mga skiers ay papagit that dogim wa that domaha. As a mitanimistay into my most time and day here is Tan is it? Umay sabi sa mistay agis kago yan umay taha mega kipay ka na witius tama. Aga aski o batama na mama TXCP. Mistake o mama o siguro TXCP mato ko check. Mistay din. Tane mana tana tote mana yap piana si binti minado rin tawag na natanabihan mga pisigas kenda man tanay mga muso yan tigi. I told my grandfather yung muso niya paano muso nista nga pagetohan misigit yan nista ka na yan ako so tanabi makasagas kineon tanabi magugawa at tihamero Nista ka na kayo doon. Temagi sa nos. Mga pang ginagawa na ko sa wapate nga na inagagina ko sa gityan ay gitik niya. Masamit na mista hite sa mga najis tiyo mista ko so. He just said it wasn't going to be the same. And I see that. It's just not the same anymore. And I'm sorry my son. All my kids didn't get to see Split Lake the way it used to be.
Vettäku vanjan Tomsin. Vuosissa pimpantsikin jo tauammat. Ako kuttakutan taani sappu. Hapia purskoitu tapanas. Madagis paninante. Madagis paninasa kekat pahiseganon itu. Vettäku vanjan Tomsin isvanjan. Asa ja pahiseganon. Eko nämä penoavattaman avanakanta. Eko tapa pahiseganon. Meillä kiinantetaan. Ai true. Tanta työsi sattuskin utan tätä. 3 years itu. 3 years inte kan ai true. Kun pekonan tante skoattemme peppakisikin tätä. Ante ojastaan tante skoattemme pakisikan. Pakisan nämä niikin tätä. Nyt vasta makuun kursi sota jepit. Tattuskaan huomitik. Manina nuusana suantik. Eikö tentikan. Kun mä oon kiinni piikon nämä nettuskin tätä, kiinnakin peppäkin sekä nuutantaa siinä tätä. Tätä on nämistä vanhemmista uus. Kun ne voidaan jääpidä. Kun ne voidaan jääpidä, niin aina paljon jääpidä, kun pettää aina pähittiä nämä. Takastin vepa nuutin mistään vepa. Asai. Asama sinaigaso pai emisikitit. Pai ma sinaigaso asay. Mutita sinaigaso asay. Asawna sinaigaso. Anak pai uta epet. Mittoni pisisane ma itta sinaigaso ya hanema. Pisisana pai aminiga ya. Ako inooti mittoni ma makasinaigaso te. Konne wagaki wana maninga wana wapai ndi tauni sini wichi stande ni simbota manga wana waita na gaso pai ta ase gosi asaki ka yesi nande ta mane wana this trinda to si na no ide trime pa no mostaten Adoni no ma aski mine vosianista. Nena nasko monoa. Eno hematsiane man desegisen aski ovasta van joskaatsa desegisen. Mestaji. Etti senagostigeti. Messetonit. Etti vägene vaunussa vaitiamagi. Ego se vagagi svihtamatta kok.
Southern Indian Lake is part of the Churchill River system, a widening of Manitoba's second largest river. Instead of building dams on the Churchill, Manitoba Hydro determined it would be cheaper to divert the flow of the river southward toward the dams on the lower Nelson River. In 1976, Hydro began operating the Missy Falls control structure, which blocks about 3/4 of the flow of the Churchill River at the outlet of Southern Indian Lake. That causes the lake to rise by 3 meters and overflow into an artificial channel that leads into the diversion route. The project permanently floods over 800 square kilometers of land. The Cree community of South Indian Lake was relocated in the 1970s to make way for the flooding. In 2005, the community was finally granted band status as Opapanapiwin Cree Nation. They have not partnered with Manitoba Hydro on any projects.
In 1973, I heard that there was going to be a dam being built at the Missy Falls area, the North End area. Our own people were involved in the consultation part, where they go visit our parents and bring a document with them, with one of the representatives, Manitoba Hydro representatives, and they bring a document, and they were supposed to translate to my dad and mom. But then they'd sway away and say something else different. That the good thing, when the consultants came in, the translators said that, you know, this document that you see in front of you will help you a lot. It'll provide you a free house, and in that house, you know, like in your accommodations in that house, you will have free running water. You won't pay for power, and so on, all the good things. And then there was those clauses, you know, in order for you to get this, you know, this pleasure that we're going to provide for you, you must do this for us. So there's other departments, other papers there. In one of the papers, it read that you have to demolish your own home. You know, like your own home where you brought up your kids. And, well, just burned me up there. I was only 7 years old at that time. I told my dad, you know, Cisco, wait for Big Brother Willie or some of the boys there, come home, so that they can read it for you instead of these people. And I was pushed aside. It says, this doesn't concern you. It hurt my feelings, and I never will ever forget that. And to this day, you know, I can see where I was sitting on top of the trunk, looking down towards the table. And the other agreement was for us to move across where we're at right now. After that, we packed up, and the sad part was people were coming down, and young people were being hired. The young people are now old today. Hired to drop off, you know, fuel to ignite the homes. And we were put in a canoe, like our boat, our nice boat, our family boat, and we were told not to look back, as my dad set the house on fire. But me, being, you know, nosy kid and all that, I wanted to know why is my dad burning the house. So I turned around, and paddle came on my cheek and pushed me a couple of times. I went like this twice. I wanted to know, and I wanted to ask my dad why are you burning our house. But then everything was quiet. Nobody said a word coming across.
Ako mä matsimatta isti, onko tiedä jonnekin vitsit suutettaa. Pani utti punuutsi tsiu. Niissä on siipi joutu jo niänän mä. Pääpä. Oi vois mä niin, mä näytän näin. Tiedäs sinne on. Taas kipati siipi. Tänne vaan toisi. Vaan toisi on siipissä se. Pani tästä osas. Sijoa nyt pienessä niissä. Hyppäskin solit juutta on niin jää. Pani on. Last year, no, a year before I spent an outi. Musta se oli jo, moni matsi tantti. Tantti me taas sinittä. Siipi outi. Siipissä souti, että tämä näin niin jää sinittä. Paljon tispat näin. Oma siipi pitää nyt. Mä olin onnoon oma siipissä. Tani tiivaa ja nuutsimme. Timana paistuu siitä on. Tää olisi mitään niin toitsi. Mä et aina ono. Äsken on otsi. Ja sitten ensin on näytä, että mä olisin näytä tuo ei sinä vedas. Mä olin vain. Mä olin omia niitä sipat.
The Misipawistik Cree live along the diversion route by which the flow of the Churchill River is redirected toward the Nelson River. They partnered with Manitoba Hydro in construction of the Wasquatum Dam, a 200-megawatt, $1.7 billion project 35 kilometers from the community of Nelson House. The dam started generating power in 2012.
Diskijana keitnar mistake on tuuttakaujak kakitiski patsakan. Kimiduita maakissa kajas kakipisik matsua. Mutsimin kaki vaski kissa kakiusik matsua kakitaki wan vaski kakiutnava. Kakipisik pakikmikuissa vuotaski. Kakimipikuissa kakikikuana uutaski tapatsita ja vani Stegi pinsona cetana, mijikki wan kui tavidi tinan, aspin gadiski maski kia. Step matse hui mitsusun, misti kui tavidi mananak pisiskiwa pidisi saka. Aku tiuma kayayan kan kapikakiayan. Aku aminan mistä ei päätty sinä vuonna siitä, kun ei kiski patikisen siihen. Ja jos mä näkin mitä vitsi kavassa kapunassa, pimpi kuitenkin minäkin pakassa mukaansa. Mutta ikius siitä maukassa haakta pakassa, mutta mä meitä minä mituskaa, kun niin pieni mikä ei muutossa. ja kuppati okaassaan maasit. Se olisi varmaankin mitäs. Kun se ponista käisikis keittämään, panen ponista käisikis keittämään, se lämmitä viitämään.
The Misipawistik Cree Nation is named for the rapids that once flowed where the Saskatchewan River empties into Lake Winnipeg. Misipawistik means Grand Rapids, but the Grand Rapids are no more. Since the 1960s, the river has been rerouted through the ironically named Grand Rapids Dam. The dam permanently floods 115 square kilometers of land, turning Cedar Lake into a giant water storage reservoir and severely affecting the areas in which the Misipawistik Cree once fished, hunted, and trapped. In 2011, Misipawistik Cree Nation signed an agreement with Manitoba Hydro, promising to support Hydro's application to renew the 50-year license for the Grand Rapids Dam, which is set to expire in 2015.
Well, the memories I have as a child is the lifestyle that we lived as Cree people. And we hunted and lived off the land and ate off the land and the lakes and the rivers. There was no vehicles, so we were totally dependent on the river for travel, and then the dog teams in the winter. So living from the land, food-wise, and then clothing, because we wore moccasins and the things that were made by our grandmother that were totally made from moose hide or deer hide. When you live a life of off the land, and you hunt off the land and making pemmican and dry moose meat and then drying fish and then smoking it and looking after it, when that is gone, and it's gone. When you look at our land, how much has been destroyed, like how many square kilometers of water is our land was flooded. That's where the animals were. When we look at the missing animals, like the porcupine and the flying squirrel, and Sigag, the skunk was missing, but he came back last year. But the things like that, you wonder what they liked about this land, and they've rejected it now. But I think we feel that too. I reject this land the way it is. I reject the way the water, what the water did to it, and then the excavation of so many gravel pits. Everywhere you drive is that ugly, ugly gravel pits that they just leave it like that. They don't think of repairing it. Most people, all they wanted was Manitoba Hydro to clean up the mess they left behind. That's all they wanted, to get rid of the driftwoods, because they had promised that our lake up there would be usable, that we could camp out there and we would be able to hunt up there, and there would be marsh birds, and there would be lots of ducks and lots of geese and lots of muskrats and beaver, and we could use that land. And Manitoba Hydro promise was 50 years ago was not when tree will be destroyed, that electricity they thought would solve or like make our life better, and they thought all the things that we buy from the store would make our life better. But it wasn't the case, because the first thing they did, the province, was build a highway into Grand Rapids, and the next thing they did was bring the vehicles in and then build a beer parlor. And at the same time they were hauling children away to residential schools. So every fall at this time, exactly at this time, they would be hauling the children to residential schools from this community. You know those big planes that used to come out, they go on the river? They make a lot of noise when they're taking off, you know, the Cessnas, it would take off And we'd all go down to the dock. The dock is gone now, but we would all go down, the community would go down there and watch the children being boarded. And then the noise of that Norseman, after it left, it would go this way, go fly out this way, and then you could hear it as it headed toward the paw. And then listening to the whimpering of the parents as they cried. And then walking home from there, and so quiet, because there was no more this noise of children playing. And that's the way it was all winter. There was only a few of us that were left here, and we missed each other. But one story I have to tell is about this one family that hid their children when the residential school came, because they hid their kids in the bush when the plane was coming. And the next day the RCMP came with their dogs, and they went across the river and they found them in the bush, the kids that they had hid them in the bush. And they took away the kids and the parents because they had to go to jail because they had broken the law. So that was happening when Hydro was coming. And so when they built the beer parlor, what did the parents have to do, right? That's when they started going drinking. We're lucky that we can remember when life was good, because that's what keeps us going.
The stories and images in this film speak of the hydro wounds that continue to mark the people and waterways of northern Manitoba. Despite efforts to address environmental harms, make amends with Aboriginal people, and brand hydropower as clean, the reality on the ground remains complicated. The sacredness of these mighty, life-giving rivers has been compromised. Sorrow still floods the hearts of many people. The proposed kiosk in Kanawapa dams, if built, would plug directly into the integrated hydropower system depicted in this film. As much as 40% of the water that would pass through them would come from the Churchill River diversion. Policymakers in Manitoba and the U.S. Midwest, which would buy much of the power from new dams, must reckon with the unfinished business in the north. So must the citizens and customers at the southern end of the transmission lines. To learn more, visit the website of the Interchurch Council on Hydropower.